Record number of U.S. cities, counties, and states to raise minimum wage in 2023. Final January 6th report urges Congress to bar Trump from ever holding office again. Pentagon fails to meet deadline to explain U.S. role in Nigerian airstrike. Refugees stage hunger strike in Austria. Traditional Qatari cloak worn by Messi at World Cup ceremony attracts interest. Christmas lights came from the Muslim world, Washington Post. From Toronto studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum. I'm Saamiyah Syed. Our top story tonight, a record number of U.S. states and communities are set to raise the minimum wage in the new year. The minimum wage will increase in 23 states and 41 cities and counties, according to a report released Thursday by the National Employment Law Project. In 40 of those jurisdictions, minimum wage will hit or exceed $15 an hour for at least some workers. By the end of 2023, additional increases are planned in 5 states and 22 localities. That brings the total for next year to 86, 27 states and 59 cities and counties per the report. The total takes into account multiple increases planned in Michigan and 4 local jurisdictions. Janet Lathrop, senior researcher and policy analyst at NELP, said raises were achieved through ballot initiatives and workers demanding higher pay. This comes after a decade after the launch of the fight for the movement to raise it to $15 in New York City. In related news, Senator Bernie Sanders unveiled legislation 13 years ago to help boost workplace democracy and curb worsening inequality. That measure was included in the $1.7 trillion Omnibus package approved by the U.S. Senate Thursday. Sanders' Worker Ownership, Readiness and Knowledge, or WORK Act, authorizes a $50 million grant program to create and expand employee ownership centers. It is modeled on the success of employee ownership centers in Ohio and Vermont. Sanders said Thursday workers deserve an ownership stake in the companies they work for, a say in decisions, and a fair share of the profits. The House committee investigating the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol released its final report late Thursday. The 845-page report draws from hundreds of witnesses and thousands of documentary evidence. It concluded that former President Donald Trump was the primary cause of the deadly insurrection and the failed attempt to overthrow the government. As part of its recommendations for congressional action, the committee's report asks Congress to pass a law barring Trump from ever holding office again. Former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson told the House Select Committee Trump knew he lost after the U.S. Supreme Court tossed a Texas lawsuit challenging his defeat. Hutchinson quoted Trump as saying, "I don't want people to know we lost." The U.S. House passed a bill on Thursday that would require yearly audits of the sitting president's tax returns. The Presidential Tax Filings and Audit Transparency Act passed in a 222 to 201 vote. 5 House Republicans joined Democrats in voting for the bill. It was brought forth after revelations that former President Donald Trump's tax returns for 2 years of his tenure in the White House were not audited. The bill calls for codifying IRS policy, which mandates that presidents are audited for every year they serve in the White House. Fox News opinion host Sean Hannity has testified that he did not believe former President Donald Trump's 2020 election fraud claims for 1 second. Details from Hannity's sworn deposition were revealed Wednesday. One public policy expert said depositions from Hannity and other Fox workers are the strongest evidence yet that Fox employees knowingly broadcast false claims. Hannity was deposed as part of the Dominion Voting System's $1.6 billion lawsuit against Fox News. He was asked under oath if he believed claims by conspiracy theorist Sidney Powell. Powell claimed that the Colorado-based company was part of a plot to rig its voting machines to switch votes from Trump to Joe Biden. An Intercept report notes that the Department of Defense failed to respond to a group of House Democrats questioning a 2017 Nigerian airstrike. Democrats set a 3-month deadline to explain the U.S. military's role in an airstrike that killed more than 160 non-combatants. The U.S. military provided Nigerian forces with intelligence support ahead of a January 17, 2017 airstrike on a refugee camp in Ran, Borno State. Nigeria bombed the camp, believing it was a base for fighters from the Boko Haram terrorist group. 6 Red Cross aid workers were also killed in the attack. Days later, U.S. Africa Command secretly ordered a probe of the airstrike. Lawmakers asked about the nature of U.S. involvement in the strike. They also asked whether the military provided intelligence or other support to its Nigerian partner. Pentagon officials were required to reply no later than 90 days after they received the letter. That deadline passed nearly 2 weeks ago. A story on Georgetown hiring Adnan Syed to support the Prisons and Justice Initiative comes with details after the break, so stay tuned and we will be right back after these messages.
A free 3-minute online chat can give you the personalized tips you need to start boosting your retirement savings today.
I am what hunger looks like in America.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. Justice for all.
To stop this genocide, we need your help.
Welcome back. On December 12th, Adnan Syed began work as a program associate for the Prisons and Justice Initiative, a Georgetown University organization. The initiative addresses the root causes and consequences of mass incarceration. It offers educational programs and training for incarcerated people and returning citizens. Syed was the subject of the hit investigative podcast Serial. He was released from prison in October after serving 23 years of a life sentence. In his role at Georgetown, Syed supports programming, including the university's Making an Exoneree class. Students in the class reinvestigate decades-old wrongful convictions. They create short documentaries about the cases and work to help bring innocent people home from prison. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police has refused to investigate false documents alleging a Muslim charity was financing terrorism. The RCMP told the Muslim Association of Canada that it should take its concerns to other agencies, including local police and the Anti-Fraud Centre. Some of the false paperwork included phony RCMP search warrants, the Canadian press reported Thursday. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said he was extremely concerned by these reports of anti-Islamic forged documents. Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino told reporters at the time that the RCMP would investigate. The Muslim Association of Canada called for a thorough, transparent, and independent investigation. The International Civil Liberties Monitoring Group supported the association's call for an investigation. Refugees at an Austrian camp staged a hunger strike to protest having to wait for weeks in tents for permanent housing, Austrian public broadcaster ORF reported. About 30 of the 70 refugees housed in large tents in the town of Spielfeld have been involved in the hunger strike since late Wednesday. The refugees are mostly from war and crisis zones in Syria and Iraq. Petra Lechans of the refugee NGO Border Crossing Spielfeld said the people are psychologically worn down. It is unclear how long the hunger strike will last. The Austrian Federal Care Agency said it is impossible to say when the next transfer to permanent quarters will be possible. A traditional Qatari cloak known as a bisht and worn by Lionel Messi while lifting the World Cup trophy last week has attracted great interest from football fans, Qatari media reports. Many, especially Argentines, flocked to the Souk Waqif marketplace to buy the garment worn by Arabs in Gulf countries. We are very proud that the bishts in our store are entirely a product of the Qatari industry, the Daily quoted a producer of the garment. Ahmed Salim, a producer of bishts, said that there has been a strong demand from World Cup fans. Qatari Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamd Al Thani gifted one to Messi during the World Cup Championship celebrations. On Sunday, the Messi-led Argentinian team beat France 4-2 on penalties to win the World Cup. 3 people were dead and several injured in central Paris after a gunman opened fire at a Kurdish Muslim cafe on Friday. Just 7 days ago in the French city of Lyon, a suspicious fire killed 10 Muslims, including 5 children. Several attacks on Moroccan Muslims took place in the country after the French team beat the Moroccan team in the FIFA World Cup. The French football body said Tuesday it would file a complaint against those who racially abused several players online during the 2022 FIFA World Cup final. Several players from the French team were targets of unacceptable racist and hateful remarks on social media, the national team tweeted. The French team has many Africans and Muslim players. A professor of Jewish studies has discovered that Jews from the Muslim world brought the tradition of Christmas lights to the United States. Writing for the Washington Post, Professor Devin Nar wrote that anti-Semitism and Islamophobia have obscured this history. Christmas lights are central to American culture. Americans spend more than $500 million on Christmas lights today. But that has not always been the case. Albert Sadaka, a Jewish man who lived in the Ottoman Empire, popularized Christmas lights in the early 20th century. He was the descendant of Jews expelled from Spain in 1492 who found refuge in the Ottoman Empire. Coming up after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we will be right back after these messages.
I want to eat apples and bananas. I need to eat apples and bananas. Why can't I eat apples and bananas?
Support the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks to help provide meals to those in need. Join us at feedingamerica.org.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
To stop this genocide, we need your help.
Welcome back. To talk about the visit of Ukrainian President Zelenskyy to the United States, let's go to Edward Ahmed Mitchell. Over to you, Edward.
Now we move to a discussion of President Zelensky's visit to the United States. He met with President Biden. He spoke to Congress. What does this mean for the future of the Russian war in Ukraine? What does it mean for the United States? What is the current state of the war? Is there any risk that American support for Ukraine may soon be curtailed? And where is this going? Where is the war going, and what impact could it have on the world at large in the months and years to come? To discuss these and other issues, I'm very happy to welcome on our special guest, Mr. James Carden. He is a former advisor to the U.S.-Russia Bilateral Presidential Commission at the State Department. He has written about many important issues for the nation, the American conservative, responsible statecraft, and other outlets. We're honored to have him with us today. Mr. Carden, how are you doing?
I'm fine. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it. So first, let's just talk about the visit itself. President Zelenskyy visiting the White House for the first time since this war started. What's the significance of this visit? Is it just kind of a symbolic thing, or is there real concrete? Are there real concrete expectations coming out of this visit for the United States, for Ukraine, and for Russia? What do you think is the significance of it?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I don't think it's a coincidence that President Biden asked President Zelenskyy to come around the holidays. This session of Congress is about to end. The Democrats will lose their majority, and presumably Kevin McCarthy or Stephen Scalise will become Speaker rather soon. So there's some symbolic importance. Zelenskyy used the occasion, I think rightfully, to thank the United States for its rather generous support for the war in Ukraine. And I think that the Ukrainians were hoping I think they used the occasion to lobby the White House and the Hill to keep up the support, because they need the support desperately because of where the war is going.
So what do you expect going forward based on, this visit, the state of the war right now? Where are things at right now in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine? And where do you think they're going in the months and years to come? Is this just a stalemate, or can someone win this thing? And how long? What do you expect?
Well, right now there's a lull in the fighting. Military sources that I've spoken to, American military sources that I've spoken to, believe that once the ground freezes in Ukraine, the Russians will launch a winter offensive. And what we've seen over the past several weeks is that the Russians have been busy launching missile strikes on Ukraine to knock out a lot of their infrastructure. So I would expect that the winter is going to be a rather difficult one for Ukraine because the Russians have amassed over the past several months a fighting force of roughly 400 to 500,000 troops. The Ukrainians don't have the kind of manpower with which that they can successfully staunch such an offensive. So at some point, I believe the Russians are going to launch a very brutal, large-scale offensive, and the Ukrainians are going to have to sue for negotiations at some point. But that's yet to be seen. And I should note that the U.S. intelligence director, the director of national intelligence, Avril Haines, disagrees with that assessment. She recently testified that she believes that the lull will be much longer. So we'll have to see. There seems to be a division in opinion about this between the Biden White House and the military observers that I've spoken to.
Mr. Carden, what do you think the possible impact domestic politics here in the United States could have on the war? There have been some Republicans who have expressed concern about continuing to fund fully President Biden's requests for the Ukrainian military. Is that, a concern the Ukrainians really have? Is that something that's just kind of politicking? And if there are any funding holdups, could that have some impact on how this war goes?
No, I don't. Well, I don't think that there's any amount of funding that we can give to them that will allow them to win. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the notion that the Republicans are going to take over the House and then suddenly become doves strikes me as somewhat fanciful. I don't really see any danger in the Republicans taking over the House and then finding themselves against the large-scale military assistance programs that have been a feature of this war, because the Republicans, like their Democratic friends across the aisle, have their funders in Northern Virginia. And by what I mean by that is the military contractors in the defense industry. This war, if there's one winner that has come out of this war, it will be them. It'll be Raytheon and Lockheed and the rest of them. And these people fund their campaigns. So I've heard that question before, and that seems to be taking over kind of the conventional wisdom here in Washington. But I don't really see any evidence for that. And the Republicans don't have a very large anti-war or restrainer caucus. Neither do, alas, do the Democrats anymore. So this is very much a one-party town when it comes to funding the war. So I don't see any prospect of that happening.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Greggs. I think you've made a really prescient point there. If I can opine as a civil rights attorney and someone who's been an advocate for human rights around the world for a while, I dislike Vladimir Putin as much as the next person, right? What he did in Chechnya, I studied as a young man, was terrific. But what I've noticed is, there does seem to be an almost, for the most part, lockstep opinion about the best policy, that what we're doing makes sense. And do you worry at all? Are there any concerns that there might be groupthink going on? There might be some way out of this that we're not thinking about, or that no one's thinking about because everyone's just so intent on we got to fund the war and that's it. Are there any voices out there who have some reasonable way out of this thing that is different than kind of the mainstream opinion right now?
Well, I mean, what you've just described is a feature and not a bug of Washington's foreign policy discourse. There's been a way out for 6 years, and that is called the Minsk Protocol. The Minsk Protocol was a peace agreement signed by Russia, France, Germany, and Ukraine in 2015 to try to put an end to the conflict. And in the intervening years, there have been several European initiatives. The Morel Plan, the Steinmeier Plan, the Clusters Approach, the SAJAC Initiative, which were launched by the Europeans to try to get the Russians and Ukrainians to come to a point where they can start implementing the Minsk Agreement. And the thing that gets lost in all of the commentary is that there was one country of the four who rejected all of those approaches. Do you know what country it was?
I do not.
Well, that would be.
Most people would say Russia. I'm guessing, though, it wasn't Russia.
You're right. It was Ukraine. Now, I can only guess as to why they refused to implement the Minsk protocols. I get a sinking suspicion from living down here in Washington that it was probably done at the behest of the United States government. So for a long time, there have been people in Washington. There aren't many of us, but there are some of us who have been urging a peaceful negotiation, peaceful end to this. And, we just get completely drowned out by the think tank community, the mainstream media, and Congress. So there really is no powerful, lobby here, which is calling for an end to this. Indeed, everyone seems to be profiting off of this. And that's very ominous because the Ukrainians aren't going to be able to win this. And even if we send in we currently have troops. I don't know if your viewers know this. We currently have American troops from the U.S. 101st Airborne in Romania. The Ukrainians are desperate for us to join the fight, for the Poles to join the fight, for NATO to join the fight. Well, that could result in World War III. So the only sensible course is to have Ukraine and Russia sit down at the negotiating table. But that option is not one that is that has any purchase among the American elite.
Yeah, one thing that struck me seeing President Zelenskyy visit the White House is that, in the weeks before this war broke out, it seems the United States was convinced Russia was going to invade, and no one was willing to give Putin some sort of face-saving way out of this, like by saying, we're not going to let them join NATO. There didn't seem to be a willingness to give the man a way out. And even though what he did was wrong, in my opinion, I think many people, it's odd to think that the United States believed at the time that Ukraine would be defeated very quickly, that President Zelenskyy would be killed or captured, and I guess was willing to allow that to happen instead of taking some step to stop the war. But I don't know, is there anything that could have been done to stop Putin from invading, you think, or do you think he was just intent on doing to Ukraine what he did to Chechnya and other places, that there was no way to give him some face-saving way out of this thing?
No, because I don't think he was intent on it because he put it off for 6 years. So the Russians floated a draft treaty in December of 2021, so a couple months before they launched the invasion. And it included some very sensible ideas, such as one that you just mentioned, that Ukraine would be neutral, would not join NATO. The United States refused even to discuss the details of the Russian draft treaty. And we know this because a high-ranking State Department official, the man who's the counselor to the secretary, Derek Chollet, admitted as much in an interview a few months ago. So the Russians are not saints here, and the invasion in February ought to be condemned and is a violation of international law and just war treaty and the rest of it. However, they're not the only guilty party here. So we have to put all of this in context, and we have to think about the big picture. And just because they did something wrong in February does not give the Ukrainians the right to drag the United States and the rest of the world into a potentially catastrophic war.
no one wants to see nuclear weapons ever used, and God forbid it comes to that. So, Mr. Carden, I hopefully will bring you back to discuss positive elements and into this conflict one way or another, the freedom for the Ukrainian people, a reasonable resolution to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. But either way, we look forward to having you back to discuss this further in the future, God willing. I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That's all from our Toronto studios tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Happy holidays to everyone, all our viewers. Stay warm and stay safe. Assalamu alaikum and good night.